All right, we just watched the third episode of Daredevil Born Again, which I believe is called In the Hollow of His Hand. Anyway, by the way, Mortimer is here, and that is not just because one of the characters in the show is called a white tiger. It's just because he loves to be on my lap. But if you remember last week, my thoughts on episodes 1 and 2 were mixed. I think episode 1 was messy. I didn't think it looked great. It didn't have a great flow for me. It felt like the purpose of the episode was just to reset a bunch of things and to give fans what they wanted. Episode 2, I believe, was much stronger. This introduction of Hector Ayala, this more complicated trial, Matt being forced to be a lawyer for someone who has very similar opinions to him about being a superhero, but in this case is doing it instead of not doing it like Matt is. Then on the other side you have Fisk, who's the mayor. How is he going to be the mayor? How is this going to affect his relationship with his wife? And then how does this affect his relationship with Matt and with Daredevil and Vigilantes more generally? So like I said, episode 1, not a huge fan of. I think there was some good stuff there, but overall, I think messy. Episode 2, much clearer and closer to what I think makes great Daredevil. Episode 3, one of the best, I think, in the series. And I say this because I think there are a lot of things Daredevil seasons 1, 2, and 3, and this is assuming they're all one series, because obviously Born Again is kind of its own thing, but like, assuming it is Daredevil season 4, there are things that Daredevil did really well, right? The Punisher confrontation on the roof, some of the ultra violence associated with the Punisher, the fight scenes with Matt, the romance with Elektra, right? Like, there are really great moments that showcase the different facet of Matt and sometimes other characters like Frank's personalities and what makes their life interesting, right? Because these guys aren't all Spider-Man, right? They're vigilantes who take the law into their own hands. Some of them have superpowers, some of them don't, but like, these are A, adult characters, and B, characters with very strong beliefs about, you know, God and Catholicism and guilt and vengeance and justice. So I think the first 3 seasons of Daredevil did a great job when it comes to focusing on specific elements of Matt's life. However, the one element of the Daredevil story, Matt Murdock's life specifically, that I always felt was lacking was the lawyer stuff. We very rarely got to see Matt Murdock actually try a case, and when he did, it was always and means to an end to, you know, learn something about another story or to further the plot of like The Punisher or something like that, to show how Matt's relationships were fractured. But we see very little of Matt Murdock just being a lawyer for the sake of being a lawyer, because that is an avenue that he can use to get justice, right? Especially because season 1 was all about like nailing Fisk. What's the deal with Fisk? And that turned into kind of an investigation, whereas this, it's not an investigation. It will be eventually, but it's just about trying to get this guy, Hector Ayala, free, because according to Matt, he didn't do the crime that he's being accused of. And clearly, you know, he's complicated. Matt loves to take on cases where he sees something of himself in the defendant. So in this case, it's obviously that he's a vigilante who's very concerned with right and wrong. And that's not why Matt takes the case originally, but a lot of the times in stories like this, what makes this interesting is when the person that Matt is defending is some sort of foil for Matt himself. And I just thought everything in this episode was so well done. Like, first of all, obviously, Charlie Cox is so good. And I think he's great as Daredevil. He's great as a very intense vigilante. But I think he's also got a lot of charm here and is able to bring something really fun to these court scenes. Like, not only is he able to lay it on thick with the drama, but he is able to tell a story the way that a great lawyer can. He is able to spin maybe a witness that's being difficult. He is able to create a narrative and really sell some sort of theme. In this case, it's because Hector Ayala as the White Tiger does things because they're the right thing to do, so why would he do this? Bring in the testimony from the different officers. It felt so good, and I think Charlie Cox really sold what I think needs to be the performance there, right? Because obviously we see Charlie Cox playing Matt Murdock, and then we see Charlie Cox playing Matt Murdock playing Daredevil, like being Daredevil. Very rarely do we get to see Charlie Cox playing Matt Murdock playing the attorney version of Matt Murdock. And I just thought it was great. Then you've got Carmen de los Reyes, who I would say this episode is at least the second lead. Spoilers for the episode. Not going to see him in the future, I imagine, unless there will be flashbacks, which sometimes happens. The actor, very sadly, since when this recorded and now has passed away, so I doubt they're going to really do too much with this version of the character. However, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with the legacy of the White Tiger. Either way, the performance here, I think, was great. Very stoic, very intentional, very, like, angry. You could tell this character was frustrated that he had to be here, that he had to stand trial. Look at all these cops, you know, judging him And then you got this really great contradiction between Matt and Hector, where Matt wants to expose Hector's identity because he believes correctly it will be an asset in the trial. But on the other hand, Hector doesn't feel comfortable doing that. And obviously Matt wouldn't feel comfortable doing that later, which who knows, maybe that will happen to him. Matt's identity has been made public at least once or twice in my lifetime. I think there was obviously the I'm Not Daredevil sweatshirt. Like, that was a thing. Like, this is comics, right? So there have been times when, like, people will say, oh, Matt Murdock is Daredevil, and then Matt Murdock proves he's not Daredevil, and then he kind of moves on. But, like, Matt Murdock merging the identities of Hector Ayala and the White Tiger to the advantage of both, although obviously, you know, there would be consequences later, but doing that while suppressing this other identity of his own, I found so compelling. But yeah, Camara de los Reyes, very emotional performance. I loved it. I love that this character is like a tragic figure, right? He cannot help himself. He has to intervene when someone's in danger, to the point where even when he knows going out as a White Tiger is going to be really dangerous for him, when he gets acquitted, he has to do that again, and eventually he gets killed for it. So those are the two big performances. Obviously, you had cops, you had a little bit of Fisk in there, and you had the other lawyers, but more or less, it was those two performances. I think the plot of this episode was very smart. It really played with the different legal maneuvers and the different just, not even legal maneuvers, but just like getting him there without getting him arrested by the cops, by fooling the other cops into pursuing the van instead of the taxi, right? Like, giving the episode these ups and downs, finding the witness, getting him to testify, then he doesn't testify, then Matt calls an audible and reveals Hector's identity. Like, it was just so compelling. You know, I really think that, like, even though, like I said, we're probably not going to get very much more of the Hector Ayala White Tiger, this is one of those characters that has had many different versions. There were many different, you know, White Tigers, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Obviously, Ava Ayala, the character that a lot of people will recognize from the Spider-Man cartoon, probably the most well-known of the White Tigers. But I think this episode is important because it builds a very strong foundation for, like, what it means to be the White Tiger, this kind of uncompromising vigilante in the world of Daredevil and Punisher, where everything is very complicated. You have this one figure with this very black and white, good and bad morality, and that helps clarify things for Matt. And just like little things, like I love the way that Matt used Hector not having the amulet. When I was watching that and Matt makes that case and starts talking about, you know, he gets assaults these people, but why wouldn't he use his magic amulet? I was also like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I was just surprised at how well they did the courtroom drama stuff. And I'm sure, you know, there will be videos, perhaps by Legal Eagles and such, about how some of the courtroom stuff in here is pretty silly, and, you know, how they maybe introduced witnesses wrong and stuff like that. But compared to other courtroom dramas I've seen, I just feel like the drama of this episode worked really well. Mortimer really wants to give bites. So he keeps hearing me talk about the White Tiger. He loves Tiger. He's a little tiger. Wow-wee. Other things I liked about this episode. I loved sassy Matt in court. Talked about that officer's black eye. Very fun. I love how Matt, when he thinks he's nailed it, folds up the little cane. He has that little kind of like, that feels like that's his, like, I don't even know what to call it, but little flourish on like it's almost like an end zone dance for him. I mean, obviously that's something he would do in any situation, but like, you know, the really quiet courtroom, then that's cool. I also love that the cops are the bad guys in this episode, and it feels like now we have a story, we have something that we're going to follow, because originally I was like, well, this Hector Ayala trial, it can't go that long, and it's not, it's over. But then in the background, you have this story about these cops who idolize the Punisher, have Punisher tattoos, take justice into their own hands. We're going to see Matt deal with that, and probably, Matt imagines how this will go, get in touch with Frank, because he believes Frank did it, because that will be what the reports will say. And then we'll find out, like, no, there's these other cops that are taking the Punisher name, and we're going to get that arc. It was kind of recent. It was clearly a response to the fact that a lot of cops have the Punisher symbol on, like, their cop cars and stuff, and tattoos of the Punisher symbol, when in reality, they shouldn't be the Punisher. And if you don't believe me, the Punisher said it in a comic, so I don't know what to tell you. And I just really like that that's the arc of the season, because I think that's pretty bold, especially in our current political climate, rolls eyes, but like having to think about this as the opening Daredevil story, like there's definitely safer stories that you can tell about, you know, Daredevil fighting Bullseye, Daredevil fighting another villain who hasn't really showed up, although we're getting like little, you know, hints of him. But instead, this being the opening arc for this Daredevil show, I think is really brave. Let's talk about that other villain, Muse. We haven't really seen any of him yet. He's an art villain who does Banksy stuff and then also, does murders. And I don't know what they'll do here, because right now it seems like he's just doing Banksy stuff. Like, he's the Punisher symbol with triggered. Like, when is he actually going to show up? I imagine he's going to be an antagonist. Now, we know that this season is kind of split up into 2 flights, or whatever you call it, of 9 episodes. So maybe he does show up more in the back half. But either way, I don't know. I think he's a cool villain. I like how he's going to marry these 2, obviously, Daredevil, vigilante stuff. And then you have Kingpin, not just crime and mayor stuff, but like art stuff. The Kingpin has always been so obsessed with certain pieces of art. He's married to a former art dealer who is now running his criminal empire and apparently not doing an amazing job. I don't know what to say besides just I love it. I think that's great. So, like, big picture, I think this season is in a really good place, because I think episodes 2 and 3, incredibly compelling story, a perfect place for us to start with a Matt who is not Daredevil, seeing him be Matt Murdock, the lawyer, and succeeding there, and then seeing that fall apart, and then he needs to take justice into his own hands. Like, that's beautiful. One thing I think is kind of a shame, when we heard reports of how this show was being retooled and reshot, one of the things that someone said was like, it just didn't feel right. He didn't put on the Daredevil outfit until episode 4. And now I'm seeing, oh, okay. So episode 1 was the reshoot episode, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, like, they all are these beginning stuff that, or I guess the execs were unhappy with because they didn't put the Daredevil costume on fast enough. And if that's the case, like, no, that was the right inclination. Like, I'm sure people would be kind of bummed that they're not seeing Daredevil jump around on rooftops and do Daredevil stuff, but like, this is the show and it is working. And I feel really confident that the rest of this season is going to be very compelling, is going to say something. I can't wait for more Frank. I can't wait to see Muse, and I can't wait to see what they end up doing with the White Tiger, because like I said, I really enjoyed the foundation they set up with Hector Ayala, and there's many family members, some of which were named in this episode, that we can do stuff with in the future. Oh, other thing, I think it's funny, I like that they call the Officer Morales was like an officer that's been named. I do think it's a little funny that people online are like, Officer Morales, that's Spider-Man, like Miles Morales is dad. That means he's gonna be in one of these. I'm like, I'm pretty sure his cousin was just like, I am Miles Morales' cousin. I have a cousin. He'll be in one of these eventually in like the Spider-Man movie. Not that I don't think that's a cool Easter egg. I guess it's kind of like if in Iron Man 2, King T'Chaka showed up and just like fully was there and was like, I'm King T'Chaka. I'm from an African nation where it's kind of secret and whatever. And then like in, I don't know, Captain America 2 or something, because someone said the name Wakanda and people are like, ooh, that means they're probably gonna do Black Panther stuff. It's like, I know, because they said it earlier. Anyway, this is not important. The only thing that's important is this show is great, and you know what else is great? Nebula. It is a subscription streaming service that I helped to create with a bunch of my other YouTube friends. People you definitely know if you like my channel, like Patrick Willems, Captain Midnight, Big Joel, H Bomber Guy, Princess Weeks, and a bunch of others. Go to the culture tab and just poke around. You will find someone you already love. And for my Nando V Movies and Nando Cut videos, the entire Nando cinematic universe, they all go up early on Nebula. The Nando V Movies videos are usually a week early. The Nando Cut videos are usually closer to a day or so. But when it comes to a movie review, that can mean the difference between me recommending you immediately see a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine, or me warning you that you immediately see a movie like Madam Web. Either way, see Madam Web. Madam Web's great. Also, if you've seen these ads in the past, you've definitely seen me talk about Abolish Everything, a new show that was coming to Nebula. Well, they recorded it, and it came to Nebula, and it's great. It is so funny. I had such a good time watching it. Check out the trailer online, and then definitely go watch an episode. I don't know if you guys are like me, but this is the kind of thing I could watch full seasons of. You can also download videos to the Nebula app and watch them wherever you want. And we're adding new creators every day. We have guest passes. It's really incredible. And speaking of incredible, Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year, $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. That is $3 a month. It's an incredible deal. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. You're going to love it. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.